What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. This is my third attempt at making this video because there is a whole lot to talk about here. Today, I want to talk to you about Season 1 of the sci-fi television series The Magicians. This is based on a trilogy of books by Lev Grossman, and I have not read any of the books, but I am going to be spoiling a whole lot of stuff from the first season of this series, and I assume that means that I will be spoiling stuff from the books. I've heard that the show actually does some stuff differently than what the books did, so just assume that I am going to be spoiling stuff from the books, even though I don't know what was done differently. The premise of this series, I guess the best way to describe it is adult Harry Potter combined with adult Chronicles of Narnia with just a touch of Lewis Carroll thrown in there. And when I say adult, what I actually mean, I don't just mean characters occasionally throwing around F-bombs and having sex with each other, although there is that. There is a whole lot of really dark, heavy subject matter being dealt with here. Stuff like depression, suicide, child abuse, and rape. Stuff that is pretty heavy, and I think for the most part, the series does a pretty good job handling a lot of that subject matter. There are 2 episodes specifically. I watched this on Netflix, but there are 2 episodes that end with a, if you are having trouble with this or something like that, here is the hotline that you want to call. I think one of them was the suicide hotline, and one of them, I don't remember, I think it was maybe the depression hotline, and I like that. I like that the show is throwing that out there, saying that this is not something to be taken lightly. I think sometimes it kind of fumbles the ball a little bit, but I don't think that that's their lack of trying. I think they are putting a lot of effort into handling this with great care, and sometimes it doesn't really work, but I think most of the time it really does. So the basic premise of this series is you have 2 characters, Quentin and Julia. They are about getting ready to go into grad school, and then they are taken to a place called Brakebills, where they take the entrance exam, and Brakebills is magic grad school. It's basically, I guess, where Harry Potter and his friends would go after they graduate Hogwarts, basically. And it's in America, and then Quentin, he passes the entrance exam, but Julia does not. And then she is about to have her memory wiped, because anyone who doesn't pass, they're supposed to have their memory wiped because it would be really unfair to them to go around knowing that magic exists and that they are not allowed to be part of that world. And she's about to have her memory wiped, and she puts a scratch on her arm, and somehow that affects their capability of wiping her mind. I don't really know how that works. That might be something in the book that's explained a little better, but immediately she knows, okay, Brakebills is a real thing, and magic is out there and it's real, and I want to be part of that world. And so her subplot throughout the rest of this season is exploring and honing her magical abilities through avenues outside of the school that her friend Quentin goes to. And her subplot does cross over and connect with Quentin and his subplot a little bit. This is a 13-episode season, and there are 2 main moments where her subplot kind of connects with the rest of the stuff going on in the series. But more or less, we get to see the world of magic in this series through her eyes, while we're getting to see this specific locale and I guess the more natural way of exploring magic through Quentin's eyes. And so while Julia goes back to her life, or is supposed to go back to her life, Quentin, he goes to enroll at Brakebills. He meets characters like Penny, his roommate, it's a guy. He is a traveler, which basically means he can astral project and he can teleport, and he's also psychic. And then he meets Alice, he meets Elliot, and he meets Margot, and he meets Katie. Elliot and Margot, they are upperclassmen. I think they're second years, maybe. I don't think it ever says. I know they're not third years, and I don't think that they're older than that, so I think that they're second years. But Elliot and Margot, I kind of thought that they were going to be kind of like the Draco Malfoy equivalent in this series, because like I said, this is kind of like Harry Potter mixed with Chronicles of Narnia, but what's interesting here is that other than the character of Alice, who is basically Hermione Granger, none of these characters really have a correlation to characters in Harry Potter, and I like that. This takes the basic vague premise of magic school, where you can have lots of weird adventures, which is very much Harry Potter, but it does some very different stuff with that, including all of the character types. Quentin, I don't really think that he's a Harry Potter type. He's not the chosen one who's going to save the world and everyone on the planet reveres him as this holy messiah. That's not Quentin's character. He could get kicked out of school for breaking the rules. He's not the teacher's pet like Harry Potter. He is not really fitting into any of the character types from Harry Potter. There is no Ron Weasley. There really isn't a Draco Malfoy like I thought there would be. You had Elliot and Margot. I thought they were going to be the Draco Malfoy, and they actually have personality beyond being snooty. That was kind of their thing at first, and I thought, okay, they're going to be kind of antagonistic, and they are a little bit. Sometimes their actions don't really match what I think their characters are supposed to be, because they are supposed to be friends with Quentin. Elliot more so than Margot, but he does become friends with Quentin pretty early on. Occasionally, his actions are like, okay, why is he acting like a jerk? But he's not really the Draco Malfoy. Like I said, the only one who really does feel like this is a Harry Potter character is Alice, and she does have characteristics and story background stuff that doesn't have anything to do with Hermione, but her thing is she is kind of the good student. She's really good at this, and everyone kind of hates her. I was seeing a lot of Hermione there, but fans of the character are probably going to say, whoa, dude, she's nothing like Hermione. But at least in this season, especially in the first half, I was seeing a lot of similarities with Hermione. But anyway, these guys, well, four of them, not Elliot and Margot, but Penny, Katie, Quentin, and Alice, they all accidentally summon the Beast into this reality. And Alice, her older brother, he died on campus a few years ago, and that's the only reason that she came to school. And then they all get roped into trying to contact him, and they accidentally bring forth the big villain of the season, the Beast. And so while Julia, her subplot is learning magic through non-conventional means that they won't teach at the school, these guys, their whole thing throughout most of the season is trying to find a way to stop the Beast. Because at one point, the Beast, he takes possession of a graduate of the school who is dating Elliot, and then he ends up trying to kill Quentin, and then he stabs Penny. So there are a few different points in this series where the Beast is trying to kill these guys, and they have no idea why. At one point, there is kind of a pause is put on the Beast subplot for our Brakebill students, where they go to Antarctica to study magic at the, I guess, Antarctic base of Brakebills. There's this Russian guy there, and he's just a total jerk. And then they come back to America, and more or less, though, their whole thing is the Beast. And I haven't even gotten into the Chronicles of Narnia part. Like I said, there is a whole lot to talk about with this series. Quentin and his friend Julia, growing up, they were big fans of this series of fantasy novels called Fillory. And Fillory is basically Narnia. There were these children. There were 3 siblings in the TV show. I think in the books there are 5 siblings. And they will enter this fantasy world through a grandfather clock. So instead of a wardrobe, it's a grandfather clock. And they have fun little cutesy adventures in this fantasy world. And their next door neighbor was an author. And they told him all about their adventures that they had in Fillory, and then he wrote the books that Quentin and Julia were fans of growing up. And so Quentin, he starts to figure out that Fillory might actually be a place, because very early on in one of the first episodes, he actually temporarily is taken to Fillory through a dream or something, and so he keeps saying, like, Fillory is a real place, and everyone else is like, no, it's not, and they have magical abilities, but as far as they're concerned, that's real, but this fantasy world that's written about in these children's books are not real. And so the Beast is connected to Fillory, and throughout this first season, they are trying to explore that and figure out what's going on. There's a little bit of time travel stuff, sort of, where they're able to go back in time and kind of see some key elements in the Beast's backstory, but throughout most of the season, they're trying to figure out what's going on here, and I like quite a bit of that. I do think that the series got a little bit of flack for the backstory of the Beast, and I guess I'm going to go ahead and get into some huge spoilers here, like I said at the beginning of the video. Like I said, this is very similar to Chronicles of Narnia. You've got a few kids who go into this magical world and have fantasy adventures, and like I said, there's a little bit of Lewis Carroll. Lewis Carroll was the author of Alice in Wonderland, and in real life, he knew a little girl named Alice, and he based the main character of his novel on her. And there was some speculation, is this grown man having an inappropriate sexual relationship with this little girl? We don't know. There's some thoughts on that. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. That is part of the backstory of our main antagonist in this series. Throughout a good portion of the season, our main characters think that the next-door neighbor author, Christopher Plover, they think that he is the Beast because he wants to know more about Fillory. He says at one point, you know, I wouldn't be able to cast this spell unless I had an extra finger on each hand, and the Beast has 6 fingers on each hand. And so they're thinking, oh, okay, he's the Beast. And then you find out, no, he's not the Beast. It's actually this boy, one of the Chatelain siblings, that the author actually molested. And so it's really troublesome. A lot of people did not like that this horrible, monstrous character actually had some pretty tragic elements in his backstory, and they felt like this series is vilifying somebody who is a survivor of rape. And it is, but I don't necessarily see that as a problem. And I think there's 2 ways you could come about this, and I don't think you're going to be wrong either way. You can look at this as there are no black and white characters in this series. Even the good characters can do some pretty awful stuff and mess up in pretty big ways. In this season, there's at least one example I'm thinking of. And the really bad characters, like the Beast, they have a little bit of tragedy to them. They're not wholly awful. It's kind of like in the Hannibal books, you have Dollarhide. Will Graham's character, he says, as a boy, I weep for him, but as a man, he's irredeemable. That's kind of what I see going on here with the Beast. As an adult, he's horrible, and he kills people with impunity, and doesn't seem to have any motive for doing it other than, I just want to kill people. But as a kid, you feel sorry for him. He has a tragic backstory that I feel like motivates and kind of propels him into the path that he's on. And I guess people had a problem with this because there's another character in this series who is raped, and then she does some questionable stuff also. And again, spoilers here, but Julia, through the course of the series, she eventually is allied with these other magic users who are not affiliated with Breakbills, and they are trying to summon a god because all of them have problems that they want a god to fix. One of them has cancer, one of them used to be a drug addict and through inaction allowed his son to die, so they want the god that they're going to summon to help them fix all of these problems. And then they accidentally summon this really evil god, Reynard the Fox, and then Reynard ends up raping Julia, and it's really messed up. It's really cringy and just not very fun to watch, obviously. I will say any of this stuff, suicide, depression, rape, and child molestation, if any of that is going to bother you, if you're going to have trouble getting through that, I would say stay away from the show. It doesn't shy away from using all those elements in this series. I don't think that it does it lightly. I can think of authors and stories that would use these things just they wouldn't play with it seriously, and that's a wrong way to put it. They wouldn't do it seriously. This tries to do it seriously, but it can still be pretty heavy watching it. So I would say if you are going to watch it, maybe slow down on it. I would watch 3 or 4 episodes a day, and after finishing the season, I said to myself, I want to do something like, I want to watch some cartoons. I want to do something a little lighter than watching The Magicians. But you have Julia, who is raped by Reynard the Fox, and then her memory is wiped. She actually calls another magic user friend of hers and tells her, I want you to wipe my memory. I don't want to remember this. And it's really powerful scene. And then this other character sees that she has a memory wipe and removes the memory wipe, and so now once again she's hit with all the trauma that happened to her, and then she ends up making a deal with the Beast. She could have killed him, and she doesn't really know how awful the Beast is because she's been separated from that subplot throughout this entire season. Quentin, Alice, Katie, Penny, Margot, and Elliot, they all know how bad the Beast is because most of them were in a classroom in the first episode when the Beast came in and then murdered their professor, and they were all frozen in place and couldn't do anything. And then they have had some interactions with the Beast, so they are trying to kill the Beast in this portion of the season, but Julia, she wants the Beast to help her kill Reynard the Fox. And so from where she's standing, she's doing what she feels like she has to do, and I am totally on board with what she's doing. But she doesn't really know how awful the Beast is. She hasn't been there for everything that's been going on throughout the rest of the season. And a lot of people, I was looking online, apparently a lot of people felt like her character became irredeemable after this. I don't think she's irredeemable. I think she's been through some trauma, and she doesn't know how to process that. She told her best friend what happened to her, and he didn't really react in any way. If my friend told me that she was raped, I would be sobbing. And he just says, like, well, you know, you couldn't help it. You were trying to do some good, and you accidentally released a god into the world, and man, I think you're focusing on the wrong part there. But then she does what she feels like she has to do, and I feel like her actions make a lot of sense. So you have these two characters who were both raped, and they end up doing some very questionable things. I think that's fairly realistic. A lot of people don't like that they took a very tragic element that happens in the real world and they apply it to this villain. I thought it worked very well. Now, maybe it would have been better if you had a character who has gone through some kind of tragedy like this and then doesn't do something questionable, like, you know, become an evil supervillain or throw in an alliance with an evil supervillain. But I think there's still room for redemption for Julia, at least. I don't think the Beast, but for Julia anyway. But I like this series so far. I plan to keep watching. What I like the most about it is that, number one, each season is only 13 episodes. You don't have any of these 23 episode seasons. Sometimes I will look at the premise of a show and I say, that looks really interesting, I want to watch it. Oh, there's 70 episodes. No thanks. I don't want to get into something that big and long. But this is only 13 episodes per season. That's manageable. I can look at a 13 episode season and say, I can finish that in a week, probably. Also, it's very unpredictable. Whenever you look at the first episode, you're thinking, oh, okay, it's going to be Harry Potter, but they're adults. And while that is the very vague structure of the series, it goes in a direction I never would have seen coming, and I really appreciate that. And then I've been kind of cheating and looking ahead at some of the stuff that's going to be happening later on, and I'm like, wow, I had no idea that was coming. I can't wait to see how they get from point A to point B. So it's very unpredictable. This series will always keep you on your toes. I like that. The characters feel very real to me. The good guys will occasionally do some pretty messed up stuff. Quentin, he makes a mistake very early on when Julia says, hey, I still remember. Can you go and tell the headmaster to let me take the entrance exam again so that I can go to school with you? And Quentin says, no, you're not. You don't belong there. You aren't capable of doing what the people at Brakebills do. And he's very harsh. And then later she reacts to that by throwing in with these hedge witches. They're not evil hedge witches, but they're not good guys. They're willing to stoop to some pretty low levels to get what they want, and they want to steal something from the school, so they put Quentin into a coma where he thinks that he's crazy. He's in an insane asylum in his brain, and he doesn't know how to get out, and he eventually does get out, but they do that to him so that the headmaster will lower the shields of the school, because that's the only way that they can wake up Quentin, and then they can steal the stuff that they want. And so that's pretty awful what she does to him, but Quentin, being very rude to her and saying, you know, hey, you don't belong to the school, that's also pretty awful. And I feel like Quentin maybe should have said, look, it's out of my hands. If I tell the dean that you remember, he's just going to come and wipe your memories again. All he had to do was say that, but he's pretty rude to her, pretty awful. And so all the characters here, the good guys do some pretty horrible stuff sometimes. The bad guys aren't entirely bad. I like that quite a bit. Sometimes the series can try that and it will miss the mark. I think this doesn't miss the mark. Now, the Beast, we don't get a whole lot with him in this season because it's really playing up that mystery aspect. I think in season 2 we're going to get a little bit more with him, probably more development on that character, so knock on wood, hopefully this doesn't go the route of him being just pure evil all the time. Hopefully they do develop his backstory of some of the tragic stuff that happened to him and he's not 100% evil. That's what I'm hoping for. I mean, obviously you have a character like Christopher Plover who is pretty evil, and his sister, they were very, very awful people. One of them raping a child and one of them looking the other way and allowing it to happen. So yeah, they're pretty awful and there aren't really any redeemable qualities there. But anyway, I like this series and I hope that you guys will give it a shot. If you're on in the American continent, I don't know what I'm trying to say there. If you're in America, it's on Netflix, the first 3 seasons. If you're in the UK, I think it's on Amazon Prime, but it's on the Sci-Fi Channel. I think it's on its 5th season right now, I think. But I was seeing advertisements for this all over Facebook and I had no idea what it was advertising, so I went ahead and checked it out and I'm glad that I did. So anyway, I hope that you guys liked this review, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back later with another video. In the meantime, have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.